the DCU Soccer Podcast. I'm here with a return guest. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is Daniel Wise, back again for another episode of the DCU Soccer Podcast. Really happy to be back, at least in this capacity, but maybe not so happy in other regards after this weekend. So do we just want to get right into it, or do we want to go with the introductions and because I'm kind of ready
You're
to go.
feeling, yeah.
We had some chats about this at times, so I guess if you wanna get some introductions out of the way about where to find us and all of that, we can start that off. But just know, I'm kind of ready to go at this point.
I wanted to first start off with you telling the people something you've been working on, and kind of see, if you want to talk about that a little bit first.
Yeah, so like I've said before, I run a newsletter called Soccer Made Simple, and it kind of got put on the back burner for a bit because of some life stuff, but it's I'm gonna be relaunching it next weekend, along with the Soccer Made Simple podcast. I did a first introductory episode this last weekend, just sort of doing a little handshake about how I personally got into following soccer and what I hope to sort of do with the podcast and the newsletter, sort of working hand in hand with each other. So at the moment, it can be found on Spotify if you look for Soccer Made Simple, or you can also find it on a whole bunch of other sources, but mainly it's at anchor.fm/Daniel-Wise. And that's where you can get the Soccer Made Simple podcast sort of right there in your browser. It'll also have, sort of the providers listed. So as those start rolling in, it's going to be on Apple Podcasts soon. I think it's on Google Podcasts now. So it's getting on all the major platforms. And then it's also got an option to send questions or voicemails my way. And I'd love to get some input from some people, especially, for people who are, learning about the sport or want to figure out how they can, talk to other people about the sport. I'd love to share my thoughts about that. So, I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at SDakotaSoccer. And then, like I said, tinyletter.com/soccer made simple is how to get the newsletter. And then anchor.fm/Daniel-Wise is how to get the podcast. And like I said, it's on Spotify, it's on Google Podcasts, it'll be on Apple Podcasts pretty soon. So just whatever major platform, just search for Soccer Made Simple and it should show up. But super happy to get all of that rolling. Really, you and a whole bunch of other DC United guys have really got me into doing this podcasting thing now, and I'm just really happy to be involved with that. So big thanks to you and a whole bunch of other people for helping me come to this point.
Yeah, totally. Definitely check that out. We're still working on potentially making this show a more regular thing, kind of seeing how that goes. But yeah, I kind of want to, I guess, jump right on in, unless you have something else you wanted to say.
That's it. So I'll start this by saying with a little adage. When I was working in DC, I had a boss who was pretty boisterous as a person, respectful, but if I did something inexplicable or sort of stupid from time to time, he'd go, "How am I supposed to interpret this? How am I supposed to look at what you've done here, and how am I supposed to see any of this as good?" So if I were to embody my boss and be across from Ben Olsen right now, I met Ben Olsen a couple of times. He's a fantastic guy, but I would be pretty frank with him because he's kind of a frank guy himself. I'd just be like, how in the world am I supposed to look at what There were spots, sure, there are positive areas to look, but how am I supposed to look at that full team effort and say this is a sign of something good to come? I'm seeing spots, but overall, I'm seeing that going into the game, I thought was going to be solid, but then coming away from the game, I'm starting to really wonder, and I know it's the first game, and I know this is after a rough preseason and all that, and after a really rough injury to Paul Arriola, having him off of the field is not a great thing. But how, Ben, how is it that you boldly line up with this 2-3-1 formation, because your left back and one of your center backs just decided to completely not show up in this game? If you look at the Audi player index, so look at what Mora tallied in 90 minutes of play, and what Frederick Briant tallied. Briant, a pretty awful. I think he had like 75 points. Just could not. He didn't have his head on his shoulders. Bad passes, kind of lackadaisical defending. But then you look at Joseph Mora, and it's like he scored like a negative 45 on 90 minutes because he fouled everyone who came even within 3 feet of him, and he hoofed some of the worst passes I've ever seen. And then if you take a look at sort of like the graphics of how Colorado lined up their shots, that left or that right side, to their orientation, was their bread and butter. Canals, respectable. Really, wasn't until they got within the box on his end that they started taking shots. But on Mora's side, they took any and every look they could see. And so at the end of the game, Colorado tallied 21 shots, 12 on goal. Those are me playing FIFA at the middle of the road professional level numbers that I put up, just taking any and every shot, because in FIFA that's what the defense does. They just kind of sit back and they give you all the space in the world to take shots. And that's what we did. So in lieu of not being able to talk to Ben right now, Ken, how am I supposed to go into next week's game against Inter Miami and not feel like we're going to see the same thing again of an awful defense? Some bright spots on offense, but I need you to talk me from the ledge here. How are we supposed to interpret?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are definitely feeling like that, right? Yeah, I mean, I thought Mora had a really, really, really bad game. I mean, all too often I told you this earlier, but to me, he looked really tired since, the starting whistle, and often way out of position, having to be covered by usually Felipe. And yeah, it was really rough, and then that did not get better after halftime, and in fact, it got exponentially worse, right?
Yeah.
I also thought it was a little strange to start out with Gressel in the middle there. They kind of moved on from that and put Flores kind of there for a lot of the game, and Gressel outside. But I thought they did pretty well in that first half overall, right? And we had that goal that was called back, but yeah, what was going on with the defense there on those? Honestly, both those goals, especially that last one, was killer, right? But
yeah,
there's no. I think the talking off the ledge is going to be, this is the first game, like you mentioned. It is a new group of guys. I thought the first half was pretty strong overall, to be honest. Not great, but decent, like acceptable, I thought. That second half to me, and I'd say 55th minute plus was just hard to watch, and you kind of felt what was going to happen, right? You kind of knew. And that just reminds me of another team that we know so very well, the 2019 DC United team.
Yes.
And that's what was really scary, right? You kind of saw that stuff coming back. In that second half, the total uh, ineptitude in the final third, the kind of silly mistakes in the back, the lack of subs, like really tired guys trying to play professional soccer,
Hmm.
honestly. And so that was my main takeaway is that we could have used some fresh legs there. And you remember our last episode, we talked a little bit about some of the key takeaways, and one of mine was like match fitness, right? Like we need to have an 11 or at least 10 out there that are ready to play 90 minutes or play for however long they can play, and they need to be subbed out, right? Like, and
Hmm.
Moore didn't seem like he was match fit to like at all.
Yeah.
But I will say, we did the other positives. There was some that I just mentioned, but we did get to see Emil Assad play. I thought that was positive. Not that he did anything too spectacular or great, but it is positive to see that he's not as injured as he was because he did have that groin strain.
Yes.
Um, and the fact that he got minutes at all means the coaching staff has some confidence in him to play. So that's about it for positive, super positive though. So yeah.
But let's go back to that though. Yamal Assad being the only sub in that game. Now I'm trying to look back at what our lineup was in this game. If I can. Okay, so yeah, we actually I really like what Ben did starting out. There was an interesting wrinkle to how he started this game with sort of like the traditional 4-2-3-1. But what was very fascinating was the fact that he put Gressel at that attacking third or at that attacking midfield. But what's sort of interesting is every time they sort of took a more defensive posture, Gressel was almost sitting back real deep as sort of a almost, yeah, kind of like a pure central midfielder. And then you had Kamara stepping back as almost like a false nine, and sort of played a very rigid 4-3-3, and to a degree high pressing. But I don't think they were necessarily able to cut off passing lanes quite effectively as a high pressing sort of tactic sort of implies. But what you had was every time we did get the ball and we sort of went more on attack, you had Gressel switching places with Flores. So Flores would cut inside and Gressel would take on the wing, and then you'd have Kamara get more deeper into that attacking role. So we had a really good start with that, and then second half, Olsen sort of ditched that entire approach. And whether that was done because maybe he wanted the guys to sort of conserve energy, but at the same time, that's why we have subs. And so I'm sort of wondering where were we on that end? So like he changes tactics to basically say, I'm not going to sub anyone, but I'm going to play more conservatively now. I that kind of escapes me overall.
Yeah, well, I definitely noticed that our defensive shape was different because last year, what I remember seeing is the 4-4-2 defensive shape where you had usually, I mean, in the beginning you had Acosta and Rooney as those two top ones, kind of pressing. Not, I mean, I guess technically yes, pressing, but not. I wouldn't call it a high press necessarily, really, even as in their defensive shape last year. But yeah, it was definitely a little different. Um, then yeah, it kind of wasn't the same in the second half, and it was kind of hard for me. It was kind of hard to identify specifically what had changed. So because I was in the supporter sections, it was kind of hard to see. But that's interesting that you noticed they kind of changed the shape a little bit. Could you expand a little more on that?
Yeah, it was very much in that it was really just the first half. And really what was really nice about that, if you remember, DC would have gone ahead a goal very early in the game, because of the way that Gressel and Flores were switching sides, where it was on attack, and Gressel off to the right side found Flores in the middle, and if he had just held off on his
Yeah.
run for just a heartbeat, he would have been onside. But it was just by the smallest of margin that Gressel and Flores linked up for almost a really nice goal. But good call on the ref, called it offside, and so that got pulled back. There was just a lot of activity. Really positive attacking activity from those outfield players. I know Felipe even had a shot and goal that, if maybe was lower by about 5 feet, would have been a screamer into the top of the net. But yeah, so like it was just really one of those things where Gressel and Flores would just sort of switch on attack, and then on defense they'd switch back again, and they'd have like a really rigid like 4-3-3. And like I said, with Gressel falling deep back into that central midfield, and Kamara falling back as well. But like I said, it's because there was sort of like the rumors of Ben talking about having a high pressing line this season, but you just didn't really have it. You had players playing forward on defense, but you didn't necessarily have a high line that really sort of like cut off the passing lanes like a high press should. In fact, like looking on sort of like the defensive side of things with that back line, they just sat back too far. And then by the time Colorado moved up into that attacking third, part of the pitch, they were practically they were in the 6-yard box at that. And that was giving Namely all sorts of room to pick out passes. Same thing with Acosta, just having all sorts of room to pick out passes. And then Kamara just had a field day, just taking shot after shot. And eventually it did come with a really nice header in the second half. But that was after DC United had a really clever little goal with Gressel taking corner and Knaus having a nice little move, kind of bunching up in the middle of the 6-yard box, and then just giving the lightest of pushes off his man, dropping back to the back post, and then finding a real nice header cross back into the back of the net. So there are flashes here of a team that knows what they're doing. But they just seem to lack a lot of confidence and consistency up front. And then again, that defense, completely no-show as far as how I sort of view it. Yes, Birnbaum played admirably. In fact, he had a really nice header that had just about went in. And then Knaus held his own as well. If you see on sort of the stat line, he held down his end of the field, and really the only shots that really were attempted were well within the 6-yard box. Whereas if you look at the other side with Mora, it was just pelting that end with shots, whether they were good shots or not. And believe me, some of those shots were awful. He still was not able to lock people down, but fouling more than anything. And so like to me, that's just really unacceptable. And I think I've gotten away from your first question where I was trying to expound on sort of like that formation shift, but that's just sort of, I guess my main point being, if you're going to play that high press, you got to be able to lock down teams. And DC United just didn't seem to be able to do that this weekend.
Well, right. Yeah, I think the most important part is if you're going to do any type of, I guess not any type, but most types of presses, you need to be able to cut out those passing lanes, because if you don't, you're kind of just running around and the other team can just play right out of it and just make a simple pass, and then you're like, well, that right. So you really need to be able to do that in terms of.
They were more aggressively like marking up the pitch, if that makes sense. But nobody was really cutting off those lanes. They were playing close to guys, but you can't really say that was a high press because they weren't really putting anyone under pressure, or they didn't have a top line really pressuring guys and then the midline cutting off those lanes. And they just didn't seem to do that. So, and then they abandoned it altogether in the second half, and they just played that sort of more rigid 4-2-3-1, and no real shifts going on between giving, like I said, having a different look on defense than they do on offense. And so, like, I'm just sort of wondering why he would go about, doing that. And so when we look at the bench, we had, O'Neal Fisher, Chris Adoy-Atsum, Emil Assad, Emmanuel Boateng, Kevin Paredes, Eric Sorga lining up. And so aside from Assad, Ben didn't see anyone else really being able to get in there. It's just, I don't know. I don't know where Ben's head is at season. It was a game that he sort of gave up on being truly like creative and progressive and active. He did it halfway and he just gave up on it.
Well, yeah, it's also frustrating because it's like, I guess I understand what he means by we don't the height, I guess, but like we're also at home opening day. Like, can we try to win? Like, like I don't why we and the other thing is like, okay, well then don't take out the tall people, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's many ways around that. That doesn't, and maybe there's something deeper in what he's trying to say. Maybe I don't think so, but I don't think that is the case.
I mean, look, when it comes to defense, it is, in my perspective, it's a 70-30 split between the physical attributes and the mental attributes. And so where I see it on defense, it is 70% the mental, and being aware, marking your men, and having just a general desire to win the ball. And aside from, Birnbaum and Knaus, we didn't really have that. And so I'm sort of wondering, like, why would you not, if, like you said, Mora completely looked checked out. So why wouldn't you put one of your bench players in, like, say, start of the second half, and just, have someone that can at least lock down that left side, or at least, put an effort into doing it. And so that's where I'm sort of like, why did that go the way it went?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally agree there, especially with Mora. Like, I think that would have been a halftime sub for me. I mean, Fisher, Adoy-Atsum, someone, right? Like, I think you got to do something. And if they can't play on the left, then, which they can, I feel, better than Mora was, I feel like, especially Chris. But if they can't, then you say, hey, Knaus, you're a left back today. I don't know, right? Like, you got to do something there because he was getting kind of smoked. And
no, he really was.
It was kind of embarrassing, honestly. And he's a great player, but it's something was down, and so that was a rough watch. I feel like that one was the big glaring thing for me. But even if you don't put in another defender, like I was saying, like, we should be going for that game, I feel. And it's early in the season, so maybe it's the fan in me, but I feel like we should have been going for that game. Take out Mora, put in, I don't know, Sorga. I mean, that's an aggressive, very, very aggressive, right? But like something. I mean, it definitely felt like you could feel how the game was gonna go, and you can feel that last year vibes. And so it's like, if you feel that, go for it anyway. I mean, it's easy for me to say I'm not responsible for it, but you're kind of playing with house money at that point, since you've let the game get to that place where it's not looking too good.
Now, here's another question I have. Look, I know Kai Kamara, he's a tall guy, all 12'9" of them. I'm kidding, but look, wherever the height is, how in the world can this team make a 35-year-old look like a 25-year-old again? He was all over the place. In good ways and in not so good ways. He really was just kind of hacking at every single shot he could get his foot on, but foot and head. But it's a sort of, at that point, it's not a height thing, it's a desire thing. And the defense completely lacked that. On that header that Kamara won, Birnbaum, or not Birnbaum, but Briant was just sort of in that general area. I wouldn't even say he was marking Kamara. It's just he was there. The ball was coming at him, and he was like, well, I guess I'm going to react. But then Kamara just knew exactly what he was doing, came up and snatched at it and put it in. So what if you're Ben, what do you say to this defense now?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I don't even know if it's a desire thing, but because to me it seemed like they just were not, especially Mora, but they were not match fit. Like they were literally not ready to play for 60 plus minutes. So I don't know if it's a desire thing or like physically could not do some of those things. But it was not great for sure for whatever reason. Did not look good.
Now, I want to put that I have exercised my demon. Now, I just want to say, I miss being there, having moved to South Dakota, but I want to get a general sense of how was the atmosphere at the stadium? What was your, sort of opening day visit like over there?
Well, I had a I had a really good day. It started pretty early. I went to the RFK Refugees live show at the Screaming Eagles tailgate. Drank quite a few free beers. Went over, to the stadium. And I gotta say, I mean, for the first while, I mean, up until really that first goal was disallowed. Honestly, I thought the atmosphere was kind of awesome. I mean, it's hard to really judge from inside the supporter section because everything sounds loud, but I thought it was pretty good. I did hear some people saying it wasn't that great, I guess, but to me it was fine. That first goal being disallowed took kind of the air out of me a little bit, and I'm assuming some of the other supporters. But I think in that second half it did die down a bit because you did, like I said, you kind of felt how it was gonna go because we've been there. But yeah, I had a good time. I went to the club shop, got a hat, two hats, scarf. So I got the Bill Hamid scarf, the new one. So it looks pretty good to me. But yeah, I had a good time overall, even though we lost. Plenty of beer. I saw one of the how they have those guys that walk around with the beer or whatever.
Yeah.
I have one guy that I've always bought beer from, so I always say hi to him and buy beer from him. So that was kind of cool to see him again. I asked him a bit about the Defenders thing. He didn't work it, but told me some cool stuff. And on that topic, I didn't think the field looked as bad as those pictures did on the day before the match, honestly. So that was kind of good. I'm also not one to react too negatively on that, to be honest. But still, it looked pretty decent considering those photos that were published.
They were not great. I don't know how long the XFL season is, but I mean, like you said, doesn't seem that bad. But as the sort of spring months wear on, do you see it getting worse, or is it do you think we'll be able to manage? Like all I'm asking is, like, are we going to have a moment where like players are going to be kicking off sections of turf like they do at Yankee Stadium?
Well, I don't think so. I think so. The XFL season's over by April 1st.
Okay.
So we have 4 more weeks, and the XFL is paying for a full replacement of the field. We don't necessarily know how the playoffs will go, but the Defenders have lost 2 games straight, scoring 0 points. So I'm not sure how much we have to worry about that at this point. After having a really good start to the season, but. Yeah, so we might not have to worry about that. But I think, it's one of those things where it's very, very possible, and I would say likely, that come, June 1st, we're all like, oh, yeah, I guess I remember that, but not really, whatever, as the field looks pristine and is playing amazingly. So, uh, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it, to be honest.
Good. Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. But like you said, there's been some conflicting reports about sort of like the general atmosphere. But I guess you're saying that things were good. Hopefully, hopefully, if we can get a win, you know, surely you'd think against Miami, right? Upstart team coming off a
Uh,
loss.
yeah. I guess the only thing is I hope it's not as cold for that game. It was pretty cold, but yeah, I guess not to dwell too much. I think you could find some of my positive thoughts and it's spewed throughout that conversation. But yeah, we are gonna play Miami this weekend, and they just played LAFC at LAFC. And you mentioned to me that you had watched that game, so I guess why don't we start out with like how Miami looks, because this is the first game they've ever played in terms of a competition.
Right. Miami, not so bad. It was, I think if it wasn't for Vermeer putting in, gosh, probably an effort that could rival that of a goalkeeper in the heat of the MLS playoffs, stopping some really fantastic shots. There's a possibility that Miami could come away from that with points. But if it wasn't for Carlos Vela on his birthday, kind of just putting away one of the cheekiest of chip shots that anyone could ever put up. There's cheeky where you've got one-on-one against a goalkeeper, and from the penalty spot, you kind of give a little movement and then you chip it over once the keeper commits. But this was, gosh, close to 18 yards out, and he just kind of lops it over, and the ball just by like the thinnest of margins just finds that little space between the post and the outstretched hand of the keeper, and finds its way in. They really kind of put up a really good effort, and I would say that LA just overall looked really, really strong. In fact, like scary strong. And the fact that Miami was able to sort of hold that off is really impressive to me. So, overall, Miami just had some really nice moves on the counter. I think they caught Miami's defense just sort of out of sorts from time to time. Really nice through balls, and that whole front four just looks poised to do some damage this season. I think they are for sure going to show up. But I would say, yeah, as far as Miami, you've got Pellegrini and Pizarro. I feel like they're going to pick out passes all day if the defense that DC United has or showed this weekend shows up next weekend. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I watched this game too. I thought both goalkeepers had a lot of challenging saves. Honestly, I thought I was impressed by both of them, except on that chip. I think Robles was a little far out, but still, I mean that literally by maybe an inch or two that chip got in, and it was a no matter who you are, you got to give it up for that. That was quite something. But I mean, it also says, that's what it took to beat Miami. It took something that was, a goal of the year contender, honestly. So it's going to be interesting. I think LAFC is looking really, really, really good, right? They just beat the best team in Liga MX and
Mm-hmm.
3-0. So this is not ye ol' MLS team. This is potentially the best MLS team ever to exist. So that's important, and
Yeah.
they kind of barely beat Miami. I mean, in terms of score, I think they had a lot of chances that Robles did save. I think. Do you agree with that? That's what I came away from anyway.
I would agree with that. And really, like, gotta hand it to Beckham for putting together, like, yeah, a very solid team that I think in all respects, really did hold LAFC. If it wasn't for just kind of like a really unfortunate positioning by Robles, and then just, I think a really lucky shot by Vela, they very well could have gone away with a point, in, which was really hostile environment coming into
Right.
LAFC's Bank of California, just with a really hostile crowd. And gotta hand it to those Inter Miami fans. They had a tiny little sliver up in the corner, but those fans showed up, and they really like sold out for Miami. So they seem to have like a budding culture that could. I'd be interested to see like what that home atmosphere is going to be like when they have their openers. So gotta say, hey, with Robinson up at that number 9, and you have Pellegrini and Pizarro, both just really talented playmakers. I'm so terrified right now. And can you talk me off the ledge here? Is there something that DC can do to show up next week and get a win ideally, but maybe the best we can ask for is a point out of this one, considering how Miami showed up?
Yeah, I mean, and it's also a Miami team that was not fully figured out. You saw a lot of frustration from Pizarro, even during that performance. So there's obviously some things they're going to be working on as well. But yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this on last episode, but our first 5 games, I said we'd be lucky to win 2. So I still mean that. I think we're still figuring this out, and it, that loss doesn't make it easier to be optimistic. But again, we're not really match fit. Hopefully that's taken care of. You know, we we've really got to use those subs. I think that's going to be the key, right? Like, even if it's just to get some fresh legs after the 65th minute during this match, it's really going to be key, you know.
Yeah.
But no,
Oh.
not able to talk you off the ledge because I'm not too optimistic. But I don't. I guess my only thing is like I don't think we're gonna win. But I don't think it matters that much. If that is helpful because again like things change. First of all, things change in general so much in this sport, but things change so much in MLS.
Mm,
You have a horrible team for the first 10 games or vice versa, and then it's totally different. And that could definitely be us, and this is really, I think, the last year that they're going to be, extend, Olsen's contract's up at the end of the year.
yeah.
So I think he knows that. Obviously, everyone knows that, and I think that's kind of why we're starting to see a little bit different. I also saw some differences on how we started to build up during possession in that first half. So building on top of that too, and like again like back to basics, like I said last week, completing those passes, getting those like because there's a lot of times in that first half where like things were almost on, like there was just
Hmm.
like right like it's just like the timing is a little off, which you expect with new players. But yeah, getting those things right, I think. You saw a lot in that first half, so I'm not too pessimistic, but yeah,
Would you be calling me too pessimistic if I think Sorga should have a shot over Kamara next week?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Okay. If
Yeah,
you want perspective of how far, leaning off the ledge I am, that's about where I am. Because I said I was over being worked up, but where was Kamara in all of this, Mister? I'm gonna tear it up this season. And as far as I can tell, I can't pick out too much that says, I can't really say like, oh, if only he just sort of, was here or there or whatever, or just had a little bit of extra something. I don't know if I can rightfully say that. What was your take on Kamar?
He did not do well, but I think that position is so finicky with this kind of change and this quick, right? Like if like that's a quick way to really kill a confidence of a position that is some say most of the position, right? Like
Yeah.
so I think we're gonna see Kamara playing 70 plus minutes of all of our first 15 or so games, to be honest, unless
Yeah.
something happens or he's like really bad or like really not listening to directions. But I think that's the kind. I mean, right or not, I think they're gonna stick with him. And I mean, Sorga seems like a really strong backup.
Hmm.
But it's that Estonian league, man. I don't know.
I'd at least like to see. Yeah, I don't know. I would have, like I said, I would have liked to have seen maybe if it was trash time, last 5 minutes of the game, I would have liked to see something.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
if it would have been like, yeah, Atsum or Fisher or something coming in, um, for Mora, at least to round something out. Like, man, the fact that you're just going to use one sub in 90 minutes kills me.
Yeah. No.
God.
Totally. I would
So,
have really liked to see Sorga. Even if like you said 5 minutes, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's the first game, man. You gotta take it easy on yourself, if anything. It's a long season, right? Like,
I know, and I probably sounded so even headed and everything last weekend, like being like, oh yeah, I want to get the losses out early so that, if you can work out the kinks early and then hit the wave, you know, by, late spring, early summer and just start, getting some good consistent results, then I'm fine with that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that sort of shows like I was feeling real optimistic, and then just I think that gives perspective of just how poor and out of form the team seemed this weekend. The attacking side was fine. I can live with that, with them eventually finding their footing. But on the defense, you can't not show up like that. And unfortunately, like I said, only 50% of our defense did. And that's really disappointing.
yeah, no, I totally feel that. I mean, and especially the last minute uh, goal doesn't help either, right? That kind of
Yep.
was just like a huge blow. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, it's the first game. All of these teams are kind of in similar positions, except I guess those CCL teams. I definitely think the more we seem to struggle. I think the hotter that seat, the already hot seat becomes even hotter for Olsen and his assistant coaches, and they've already identified the need to bring in assistant coaches, and that kind of has happened, not really, but the,
Yeah.
the team knows, right? Like it's not like they're oblivious to what's going on or the stats around it because they're pulling the stats, they're pulling the expected goals and expected goals against. They know what's going on and the contributions that some certain decisions contribute to that. And I know it's not necessarily that helpful, but I think let's say we win 2-0 against Miami next week, and we look great, then we have a much different discussion. So
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? Like you know how it is. Like in 12 games, we could be looking at like, remember how stupid we sounded when we were so mad?
Hmm.
Just like we think we're so stupid for sounding so optimistic now, but I still feel relatively optimistic, to be honest. So I was disappointed, obviously, especially being there and seeing that live, but I really did see out of Flores, especially in that first half, that got me excited, and Gressel with some of the balls he was doing. I felt pretty excited, and that energy was there for a decent amount of time from most of the players in that first half. So I'm hoping that they don't take from this game that, oh, that was what the problem was, right? But
Hmm.
instead realize, oh, like we're on to something. Some of this stuff that we've been thinking about or working on is what we want to continue to do.
Right. Yeah. Anything else as far as, you know, that match or the weekend goes? You know, 25 years of MLS, what, sort of looking at results around, how do you feel about some of the teams this
Well, I think the one of the things that happened was Joseph Martinez tearing his ACL, which was really, really sad to see.
season? Yeah.
He's so huge for the league, and that I
You
mean
want
we
to talk
know
about
how
changes? Yeah.
yeah I mean we know how hard that hits an MLS fan base because we recently had that with Areola, right? Like we know
Yeah.
how much that hurts, and Joseph's kind of such a personality for the league and is someone who represents our league well in South America and in his national team time. And it's really sad because first game, it's just, and it didn't even, like when you watch it, I mean, this is kind of how a lot of these ACL things go, but it didn't look that
Hmm.
bad. And then he immediately starts pointing at it, and it's like, oh, God, you already know. Immediately he's
Yeah.
pointing at that knee, and he's just like, that's not that you always know, and it's just really sad. So that's the main thing that this week was really disappointing as an MLS fan. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. That's heartbreaking. And so, especially someone, yeah, who really is getting featured so heavily with like MLS marketing and all of that. To see that happen, they did come away with the win this weekend, but like you were saying, how things can change so drastically in MLS. How does that impact Atlanta is in? And then, for me, like one of the most surprising results was Minnesota United pulling out that 3-1 win against Portland and
right.
showing, maybe they're a team to be reckoned with this season with Kevin Molino pulling out a fantastic brace game. Kind of excited, especially with new upstart teams, coming out and not doing the typical thing that upstart teams do, which is typically be bad
Be
for like
terrible.
5 years.
Yeah.
Now Minnesota, they did have a really rough launch. Their first couple of years were really really rough, but they offloaded some people. They brought in some really talented guys, and they seem to have some solid depth. And that's a team that could, very much surprise us. Same thing with Colorado. They looked good. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's so much that Colorado looked so good or DC United looked so bad, but yeah, talk about a couple of surprising results again from some teams who have not had the best of recent. So yeah, that really really good stuff overall.
Yeah, I always hate watching Seattle or Portland on TV because to me, like I guess it's the color of the field or something about those fields. They just look
Yes,
so bad. You notice that too, right? Like it's weird.
absolutely.
It's
It
like
they
washed out or it's something.
it just well, and especially just with the uniforms, like when I play
Right, right.
FIFA, if I play against Portland or Seattle, they're going away colors regardless of where that game is happening. It's just that's just kind of the worst. So, um, but yeah, that's sort of yeah, that's my take on this week. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
I thought it was really cool that Nashville sold so many tickets. Um,
What was it, 55, 56, somewhere around there?
Yeah, something. I mean, anything more than 30 is, to me, amazing as a long time supporter of the league. I mean, honestly, anything better than 15,000 is still kind of breaking my mind after some of the years we had. But yeah, I mean, that was just it seems, we've had these teams do this now for a little bit since kind of, Seattle, I guess, and some other examples. Obviously since then there's been Atlanta, stuff like that, but like it's just such a big deal that many people went to a soccer game in Nashville, Tennessee, in the South. That's been
Yeah,
a big thing, right? Like, oh, soccer's never going to work in the South. I mean, Atlanta proved that wrong pretty aggressively, right?
yep,
um, And so it's nice to see that it's not an isolated incident. Hopefully it continues, right? But like 55,000 people, that's a lot of people for a live event, and especially
Yeah.
for soccer. That's just, and it broke the record for most in Tennessee ever or something for soccer. So I don't think that can be understated. And I actually thought Nashville did a pretty good job. I actually like their uniform a little bit.
Really?
I did, yeah. A lot of people like, I guess everyone else was like, that stuff is terrible, but I actually kind of liked it, to be honest. It looks refreshing to me, like lemonade. I don't know, like well, it looks different, even though I know Columbus, but like it looks different even than that to me. It looks, I don't know, like new stuff. I don't know.
I can dig it. I would, yeah, really, really impressive how the league is rebuilding an identity. Like you said, in those early years, 1996 to, gosh, you almost want to say like 2008, things were real lean around that time. And then even, yeah, it's just within the last few years that the league has built up a pretty incredible stature. The joke has always been like, MLS is the league of the future since its first incarnation as the NASL back in the 70s. Like soccer's the future, so we're bringing in Pele, Johan Cruyff, and these great blockbuster players. But now it's sort of like, yeah, you've got really good players coming in, but you've got a very solid foundation of fan support. So it's really good seeing how much MLS it seems to be at minimum paying lip service to it. Considering kind of the bad blood that seemed to boil up a little bit last year with supporters and the league itself. So the fact that this year they're really sort of giving fans their due diligence is good, is that they're acknowledging that.
Yeah, I guess the only disappointing thing was I think we had around what 16,500 at DC. I would have liked to see more. I think it's so cold against the Rapids. I think that's a little bit hard of a sell, right? But
Yeah.
um, we'll see against Miami. That's for me. That'll be the real bar, right? Like maybe not the bar, but that'll be an interesting thing, right? Because like Miami, they're new. Beckham, Pizarro, and hopefully not as cold. I don't think it will be, but that'll be to me like I'm kind of hoping for a sellout, to be honest. So
I would say for certain, like it'll probably be the Galaxy bringing in Chicharito. Had a rough start, is in his own way for his first game, but you gotta think Galaxy's gonna a lot of people just to see it. If LAFC stays hot, a lot of people are gonna want to come in to see Carlos Vela. Hopefully not cook DC too much, but
like last year, yeah.
woo. So, really, I mean, it's kind of, does that say something about, I don't know. It's sort of like, we're sort of talking about the other team bringing in attention. But at least it's the teams themselves rather than, some older European player. It's really actually like more players that have grown on this side of the sphere. So I guess there's some positivity to look at that. That I guess that's sort of like the MLS 3.0, where it's really, instead of bringing in kind of like the dinosaurs from the bigger, more prestigious leagues, we're seeing a lot of movement among from Liga MX up to MLS. So that's a really good sign of progress in a way. But there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of agree. I think the only thing is like my point is it being Miami is like it feels like the real home opener kind of. It's like
Yeah.
the Rapids. It's like yeah, but we're playing Miami in a week. Why don't we just go to that one kind of thing? Um, but not necessarily just because of the prestige around, quote unquote, I mean, not proven, but hypothetical prestige around the club of Miami. But yeah, I mean, I also saw a lot of people supporting Flores with Peruvian stuff. I think a lot of people came out for that, which I thought was really
Nice.
encouraging. I think you'll get even more of that with the Miami game, and I think that'll be exciting. Kind of seeing Flores against Miami, I think it'll be more exciting for the Peruvian fans as well, because I mean, there's a large Latino population in Miami, and it's something where it's, you know, you think more about Miami than you do about Colorado in general, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can kind of see that. So I'm kind of excited. I hope we do better on attendance. I'm pretty positive we will. I think we'll start to tell pretty soon with ticket prices. Maybe can keep track of that. Um, but yeah, I guess the only other thing I wanted to chat about too is we talked last week about Federico Higuaín coming,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, potentially, and now it seems, I mean, it is confirmed by the club, not just Stephen Goff and Pablo Mara of the Athletic.
Yeah. Uh, you know the I love the reports that Higuain was in the locker room after the game, and so I'm
Right,
kind of
right,
like, well, you know what? If he's sticking around after that, I guess that's a sign. So I'll take it.
right.
Yeah, we kind of talked that to death, but I guess just to sort of recap, this is mostly a move for bringing Higuain in as a player coach. He's going to spend about 6 weeks sort of getting match fit because he tore his ACL last season. But he's being brought in because he's got some interesting links with Argentina, and he's got a really good football mind. And that's something that Ben really touched on, is the guy, not only does he have a great mind, but he also has a really deep fire in his belly. Probably has a lot to prove, having been offloaded by the Columbus Crew, who he served for a good number of years. And so, very, very excited to see sort of what fruits come from this new relationship.
Yeah, totally. We did talk a lot about it last week, but yeah, I think that's, there's a lot of people saying different stuff, on Twitter or whatever, but I personally think it's a good move. I think it might be that one extra piece we need, especially if, not the same position that Paul was playing, but still, it's added depth in that attacking third, so that's always good.
For sure. Um, yeah, that's like I said, really interesting ties to Argentina. Uh, for what I can tell, that seems to be a lot of where DC United's scouting focus seems to be going. So having that name tied is going to be big. I think Assad, if he can find his form, he will be a threat on that left side. Yeah, having worked out, my frustrations, I do feel overall still good about the team. Maybe not thinking that they're going to go real deep this season, but I think they are uh, building for the future in some regards. So that I'm starting to feel better about all.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to talk you back from that ledge a little bit, maybe it seems. Do you have predictions for the Miami game?
Whoa. I mean, geez. Robinson is only an inch shorter than
Stop.
Kai Kamara.
Oh, right,
So
yeah,
height is going to be a factor again. And like I said, with Pellegrini and Pizarro, if DC gives them the space that they gave Colorado this week, they're going to get just uh, the, Pizarro's just going to have a highlight game if that's the case. he's going to find Robinson. He's going to find holes to move inside. It's just
he's gonna score.
he's going to score. I if our attacking, prowess can come together, I would feel confident saying that DC can put up 2. We very well could have put up 2 this week, save for an unfortunate offside call on Flores. Ben needs to commit to one thing or another. If he's going to play that fluid high press, he's got to get that worked out. Otherwise, they're not going to have an identity. And if they go back on their haunches in the second half, we're going to get picked apart. So all I can really ask for is a dedication to something. Even if we lose, say 3-2 or something like that, if we can go that full 90, showing creativity on the offensive side, then I'll be okay with that. But I don't want to see that 2019 feeling coming back again, because that's why I felt so down about this opening game. Was I felt like we didn't exercise any of the ghosts from last season.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see progress, not necessarily expecting a win, but if I can see something that says, okay, this team's got an idea now and they're going to work together, and through the course of the season, they will solidify. But if it's, again, just sort of wishy-washy, falling back on old habits, then you're going to have to talk me back from the ledge again. So there might be more of that coming up. So we'll just have to see. How about you? What's your prediction?
Yeah, so I kind of think I think we're aligned on two goals for DC, but I think it'll be a 2-2 tie. I think we start to get some stuff together. I think I think we might even see a different lineup. I'm hoping maybe something different. Maybe not. I don't know about that, but I could see Assad coming in for someone. I'm not sure who, but you could see that happening. I think way more importantly, I think we need to use those subs. Like I said, like if we're not going to be full, if you're all not going to be fully fit, then we either need to start someone who's fully fit, or we need to bring in subs at halftime, 65 minutes, 75 minutes, and not just one. So that's kind of how I think. But I do think we pull out a tie here. I think the team will understand the importance of this game. And how that will, affect even themselves going forward. The Rapids, whatever kind of first game, whatever. But now, we're starting the real season here, and it's Miami, it's at home, and this is the kind of game where if you win throughout the season, we'll be like, this happened, but we did beat Miami, that kind of thing. So I think they know the importance of winning this game. Especially since it'll be our last home game for a few weeks. So, the fans really want to see that. And so I think they're gonna pull out a tie, not quite make it, but will show more improvement over last game.
I hope you're right. I guess we're coming up close to the end of the show. Did you have any shout outs in mind?
I wanted to give one shout out to DC United Kingdom at DC United Kingdom on Twitter. If you follow the show, you probably already know about them. But James runs that. I think I've been on that podcast. Big supporter of what he's doing. It's cool, especially because he's in the United Kingdom and spreading DC support anywhere, even if it's one or two fans at a time. I think it's pretty cool and pretty critical, as if this league is going to be what they say it's going to be, which who knows, but that international support could be pretty cool and critical, and like getting the message out there sooner is I think a worthy goal.
And I'll just piggyback on that. James, who is the host of DC United Kingdom, one of the warmest hosts you'll ever listen to. on a podcast. The guy, I don't know if it's a British thing. This might be the Anglophile me speaking, but there's a certain thing to listening to his show that's so nice. It's like, either a BBC Radio or Radio One quality to him that like I just really really like, and he has one of the best sort of kind of radio voices that I've heard. And he, like I said, as a host, just one of the warmest personalities. He's got this knack for just making his guests feel like they've known each other for a really long time. I think he just brings on really interesting people. He had on the president of the Screaming Eagles on last week, and they had a really good interview, sort of talking about sort of the history of DC United and the supporter groups, and how that's all kind of grown together past 25 years. So really, really good stuff from him. And yeah, that's a fantastic shout out from you. That's really good.
Yeah, totally. You can go check him out on Twitter at DCUnitedKingdom. It's spelled how it sounds, I guess, obviously.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely agree with everything Daniel just said. But yeah, I think that's about it for the show. I guess the only other shout out I'll say is for this week, since I went to the RFK Refugees podcast, which was hosted by the Screaming Eagles. I think giving them both a shout out, Screaming Eagles and RFK Refugees. I thought it was a fun event. I drank a lot of beer, so that was fun. And I thought it was a good show as well, which is also on their feed. So yeah, I had fun. I got to meet some people. I met some Colorado fans who flew in for the game, and yeah, everyone was super nice. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And I guess on my end, just a couple of shout outs. Switch the Pitch, which is a really good,
Yes, definitely.
female centric soccer website that primarily focuses on MLS and the women's national team. Good friend of ours, Sarah Kalassi, is the editor in chief. Really good website, good news coverage. Sarah just has a fantastic Twitter game, and she is a great correspondent at DC United games. So she is always worth a follow. I think it's at Sarah Kalassi on Twitter. That's I want to say that's two L's and two S's followed by a Y in her name. So she's worth a follow. And Switch the Pitch, which is Switch the Pitch One on Twitter, and then switchthepitchsoccer.com. And then the other one is a really good newsletter that I've subscribed to called the Daily Footy Club. And that's on Twitter, Daily Footy Club, and then dailyfootyclub.com if you're interested in sort of like getting some quick bites of what's happening over in Europe. So really good stuff right there.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually mine for next week, but
Oh. Ah.
but no, that's cool. I mean, we're aligned, it seems, on all these. I think the one thing that I mentioned, God, probably on one of the first episodes when we had Sarah on is, and at the time it was called MLS Female, but I think one of the really cool things that I've been using Switch the Pitch for is, I can't watch all the MLS games. Like I physically cannot. I'm doing things. I'm, going places. I'm, on a date with my girl. It's like I'm always doing something. So I can't watch all the games. So when I follow their account, they post like updates and stuff. And so it helps me keep track of all the different scores or like happenings around the league. But it's not overbearing or too much at all. It's just the right amount. And so I use that to kind of, I'll see something on there and I'll be like, oh, okay. And then I can go search it or go on their website or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a really good resource if you're like me and can't watch every single MLS game.
Yeah. Again, they show up to all the games, reporting live from the stadium. So yeah, like you said, really good reporting from them, and really a crucial resource that helps you stay plugged in when you can't always be plugged in.
Absolutely. And I think that'll about do it for this week. Do you want to tell the listeners how to find you and all that?
Yeah, again, Twitter and Instagram is DCUsoccer, and my name is Daniel Wise, and I run the Soccer Made Simple newsletter, which you can subscribe to at tinyletter.com/soccer made simple. And that's going to be relaunching next week with the brand new Soccer Made Simple podcast, which can be found searching in Spotify, Google Podcasts, and soon Apple Podcasts for Soccer Made Simple. And then if you want to get it right at the source, and also send me some voice messages or questions, that's at anchor.fm/Daniel-Wise. So would love to hear from people who have, pressing soccer questions that, even for people who are knowledgeable of the sport, if they have questions that they're just too afraid to ask, I love being able to kind of look up different esoteric things and then be able to explain it for just about anyone to understand. So yeah, I'm super into doing that, and yeah, would appreciate any and all follows. Looking to, like you said with James over in the UK, I'm just sort of trying to create soccer fans one listener at a time. So it's just been a really joyful project for me.
Yeah, totally. Make sure you check that out. You can find the podcast and all the other stuff that I'm doing with DC United at DCU_soccer. If you like the podcast, please make sure to head over to, iTunes or whatever you're listening on and give it a rating. But yeah, I think that's all for this week. See you next week.